My parents spent $500,000 to ensure my brother would never have to worry about a mortgage again, while they handed me a rusted toolbox and told me to be grateful for the memories. They thought they were crowning him as the king of the family estate, but they forgot one tiny detail: you can build a palace anywhere you want, but if you do not own the dirt beneath it, you are just a high-end squatter. Growing up, the hierarchy in our house was clearer than glass. My brother, Leo, was the golden child. He was charming, athletic, and possessed a supernatural ability to fail upward. I, on the other hand, was the reliable one. I was the one who got the grades, worked the summer jobs, and stayed out of trouble. In my parents' eyes, my independence was a reason to ignore me, while Leo's constant need for rescue was a reason to adore him. When our grandfather passed away 5 years ago, the divide became a canyon. Grandpa was a sharp man who saw things my parents chose to ignore. In his will, he left the family home and the main business to my parents. To Leo, he left a vintage sports car that was sold within a month to fund a vacation. To me, he left what everyone called the wasteland. It was a 12-acre stretch of rugged, overgrown terrain behind the main family property. My parents laughed when the lawyer read the will. My father told me I could use it to practice my hobby of being boring, while Leo got the car and a promise of a future inheritance. I did not mind. I knew that land. I had spent my childhood exploring every inch of it. I knew it was not just dirt and weeds. I spent the next few years working 2 jobs and living in a tiny studio apartment, pouring every cent I had into taxes and legal fees to ensure the title for those 12 acres was ironclad and separate from the main estate. I even managed to buy a small, connecting strip of land that led to the main road, making my plot a strategic goldmine, though it looked like nothing more than a forest to the untrained eye. Fast forward to last year. Leo, now 30 and still living in my parents' basement, decided he was ready to be an adult, provided someone else paid for it. My parents, eager to see their favorite son settled, announced at Thanksgiving that they were using the bulk of their retirement savings to build Leo a custom, $500,000 modern farmhouse. They did not just buy him a house, they chose the perfect spot for it. They picked a beautiful, flat plateau with a stunning view of the valley. The only problem was that the plateau was on my land. During the announcement, my mother turned to me with a look of pity. She handed me a small, heavy box. She told me they wanted to make sure I was not left out. I opened it to find a set of old, tarnished silver spoons that belonged to my great-grandmother. She said they were heirlooms and that, as the responsible one, I would appreciate the sentiment more than money. Leo sat across from me, smirking, already scrolling through interior design websites on his phone. I asked my father if he had checked the property lines before breaking ground on the foundation. He brushed me off with a wave of his hand, saying he had lived on this property for 40 years and knew exactly where the borders were. He told me not to be bitter and that my grandfather's 12 acres were further back, deep in the woods. I tried to tell him, but Leo interrupted, calling me a jealous killjoy. So, I went silent. I decided that if they were so confident, they could proceed without my input. For 8 months, I watched from a distance as the construction crews rolled in. I watched as the foundation was poured, the frame went up, and the floor-to-ceiling windows were installed. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture. Leo posted daily updates on social media about his new empire and how hard work really does pay off, conveniently forgetting that he had not paid a single cent for the project. 2 weeks before Leo was set to move in, I received a frantic call from my father. He sounded breathless and angry. He told me that there was a massive mistake at the county records office and that I needed to come over immediately to sign some paperwork to fix a clerical error. I told him I would be there on Saturday. When I arrived, the whole family was gathered at the new house. The sun was hitting the glass just right, making the $500,000 structure look like a jewel. My father handed me a stack of papers. He explained that when they went to file the final occupancy permit, the county informed them that the house was built entirely outside of their property lines. He told me it was a hilarious mistake and that I just needed to sign a quick quitclaim deed to transfer that small portion of my land back to them for a nominal fee of $1. I sat down on the pristine granite countertop in the kitchen Leo thought he owned. I looked at the papers and then looked at my parents. I told them I would not be signing. The room went dead silent. Leo started laughing, thinking I was joking. But when I did not smile, his face turned a shade of pale I will never forget. My mother began to cry, accusing me of trying to ruin my brother's life. My father turned bright red, shouting that he was my father and that I owed him for everything he had done for me. I reminded him that they had given me a box of spoons while giving Leo a fortune. I reminded him that I had warned him about the property lines on Thanksgiving, and he had told me to be quiet. I pulled a folder out of my bag. In it were the surveys, the tax records, and the title deeds. I showed them that not only did the house sit on my land, but the new driveway they had paved crossed over the strategic strip of land I had purchased years ago. Leo's house was effectively landlocked by my property. I told them they had 3 choices. 1. They could buy the land from me at its current, appreciated market value, which, given the new development, was now worth $300,000. 2. They could pay me a monthly ground lease of $4,000, which would increase by 5% every year. Or 3. They could move the house. My father screamed that I was a monster. He said he would take me to court and that no judge would allow a son to do this to his family. I calmly told him that the law did not care about family trees, it cared about titles and deeds. I had been paying the taxes on this land for years while they ignored its existence. I told them they had 48 hours to make a decision before I filed an injunction to block access to the driveway. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of harassment. I received hundreds of texts from cousins, aunts, and family friends calling me greedy and heartless. My mother called me sobbing, saying she did not know where she had gone wrong with me. But I stayed firm. I remembered every Christmas where Leo got the latest gadgets while I got socks. I remembered them refusing to help with my college tuition while they paid for Leo's 3rd attempt at a freshman year. On the 3rd day, my father called me. His voice was defeated. He had spoken to a lawyer, and the lawyer had told him exactly what I already knew. The house belonged to whoever built it, but the land belonged to me. If I wanted to be difficult, I could eventually petition to have the structure removed or seized. They could not afford to fight a losing legal battle while also paying for the house. They chose option 1. They had to liquidate a significant portion of their remaining retirement funds and take out a secondary loan to pay me the $300,000 for the land. They had no choice if they wanted to save the $500,000 they had already sunk into the house. The day of the closing was the most satisfying moment of my life. I sat in a mahogany-paneled office, and my parents would not even look me in the eye. Leo was not there, he was too busy throwing a tantrum at a local bar. As I signed the papers and handed over the deed to that specific plot, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was no longer the invisible son. I was the man who had outsmarted them all. But the story does not end there. I took that $300,000 and invested it into developing the remaining 10 acres of my land into a luxury eco-campground. Because I owned the access road, I was able to build a separate entrance that did not go anywhere near Leo's house. However, my guests had to drive right past his front gate to get to the trails. Within a year, my business was thriving. I was making more money in a month than Leo made in a year at the job my father had to beg his friend to give him. Leo, meanwhile, was struggling. The house was beautiful, but he could not afford the utilities, the insurance, or the taxes on a property that expensive. My parents were broke from the payout and could no longer subsidize his lifestyle. A few months ago, Leo came to me. He was humble for the first time in his life. He asked if I would be interested in buying the house from him. He said he could not keep up with the maintenance and that my parents were breathing down his neck to pay them back. I looked at my brother, the former golden child, and I felt a brief flash of pity. But then I remembered the rusted toolbox and the silver spoons. I told him I was interested, but I would only pay the current tax-assessed value, which was significantly lower than the $500,000 they had spent to build it. I also reminded him that since I owned all the land surrounding him, the resale market for his house was basically non-existent. No one wants to buy a house in the middle of someone else's private resort. He had no choice but to accept. I bought the house for $350,000. I now live in the mansion my parents built for their favorite son, on the land my grandfather left for me. I kept the silver spoons on the mantel as a reminder of where I started. My parents do not visit. They told the rest of the family that I stole their retirement, but I do not care. I did not steal anything. I simply held on to what was mine and waited for them to realize that favoritism has a very high price tag. Leo moved back into their basement, and from what I hear, they spend most of their time arguing about whose fault it is. The view from the plateau is even better when you know exactly what every inch of it cost. I spend my evenings on the deck, looking out over the valley, watching the sunset reflect off the glass. Sometimes, I take out that rusted toolbox and use it to fix small things around the house. It is the only thing they gave me that actually turned out to be useful, because it reminded me that if I wanted something built right, I had to be the one to hold the tools. They thought they were giving me scraps, but those scraps were the foundation of everything I own now. They played a game of favorites, but they forgot that the game is always played on a field. And in the end, I was the one who owned the field. The silence from their side of the family is the best gift they ever gave me. It is peaceful here on my land, in my house, built with their money and my patience. It is a lesson they will never forget, and a victory I will never stop enjoying. Whenever I see the deed to this property, I do not see a legal document. I see a map of exactly how the underdog finally won. And every time I walk through the front door of this $500,000 house, I make sure to use the key that I earned, standing on the ground that was always mine.